Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 200, and to celebrate that, fortunately, I have a very special guest, an old friend and previous co-host with me, and that would be Hans Lilja. Hello, Hans. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. Good to be back.
Yes, it's great to have you back, man. It's been a while since 2020, in the middle of COVID. So
time goes fast.
Yeah, it sure does. And you've been a busy boy. You've been keeping busy with your Stephen King material, not just on your website, but you've also been producing books and also doing some lectures. So since the last time you've been on, if you can remember back that far, since 2020,
I'll try.
What have you been doing in terms of your Stephen King coverage? I know that you've revamped the website, so that was one thing that you did. And then if there's anything else, lectures or whatever that you want to talk about, why don't you just let everybody get caught up with what you've been doing?
Yeah, I did a total redesign of the site, which I tend to do from time to time during the years. Been there for 28 years now, so
wow.
Yeah, I need to figure something fun out for the 30-year anniversary.
Right.
Yeah, and the book Shining in the Dark keeps selling all over the world.
Great.
When this year is over, it's going to be out in at least 17 languages.
Cool. And what's that book about for people that aren't aware of it?
Yeah, that's actually a collection of stories that I did to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the site. So it's been a couple of years now. And from the beginning, it was just meant to be released in the US, but it spread like COVID all over the world.
You released it at a good time.
Yeah. So... but that stories from different authors, one from Stephen King, The Blue Air Compressor, and other Chismar, Clive Barker, John Ajvide Lindqvist, and others also in there.
Right.
So that's more of me presenting stuff than actually writing stuff. I've done an afterword and a foreword, so written a little bit of it, so I can truthfully say that I've been translated into Japanese, which is cool.
Cool. That's cool. Haiku.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and then I did a book called, actually, that one came about when my Swedish publisher released Shining in the Dark here in Sweden in paperback. They wanted me to do another book about Stephen King. And as I usually do when it concerns Stephen King, I say yes first, and then I think to myself, what have I done? So the toughest thing there was actually to get a good topic to write about, because most of the stuff has already been covered in all the numerous books about him.
Right.
So I thought about it long and hard, and I realized that during my lectures all around in libraries in Sweden, the thing that people get most surprised about is that he has actually done stuff that isn't horror.
Right.
When I talk about The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, they almost look at me and think I'm trying to fool them into reading Stephen King.
Right.
So I thought that might be a good angle to go for. So that's why the book is called Stephen King, Not Just Horror.
Cool.
And it's about things that he's done that isn't horror. And it's my way to try and get people to read Stephen King, even if they don't like horror.
Right.
And especially if they think that Stephen King is only horror and is a bit frightened to read him. I want to try that to get them to read him anyway.
Yeah. I don't know if you do it during your lectures, but you should also always include that grocery store story about the Shawshank Redemption.
That one is usually mentioned, yes.
Very good. Okay, so we'll get into that book and detail a little bit later, but because it's been a while, I wanted to do some catch up. Oh, the other thing that I don't know if you want to mention is you also have been lecturing, right? Is that a regular thing, or is that just once in a while?
It's semi-regular. I travel around libraries in Sweden, and I think I've done since 4 years. Last 4 years, I've done like 50 of them or something like that.
Wow.
So I talk for about 70, 80 minutes and talk about Stephen King and everything he's done. And My public is everything from old ladies who doesn't know who Stephen King is to geeks like me who know most everything and
Right.
everything in between. So that's really fun. And
Okay.
I have actually 5 lectures booked already this year. So
cool. And are they? Where are they usually? Are they in like libraries or bookstores or?
Usually in libraries.
Okay.
Some are in bookstores or other places, but mainly in libraries. Yeah. So usually free of charge. So it's just to show up as well.
Okay.
So that's
very cool.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So you're an accomplished public speaker now.
Yep. I can add that to my list as well.
Very good. All right. So let's just do like a little walk down memory lane with Stephen King. So I'm going back to the 2020 year and using your site as the reference.
Good.
I'm going to cover some of the books. So 2019, we had The Institute. And that was an interesting book. It had echoes of other books, I think, that he had written before. So it was an okay book. I wasn't crazy about it. I didn't dislike it, but he definitely did some good characters. Do you have anything that you can remember about The Institute that strikes you? Or
yeah, I remember quite liking it. And I've heard lately that a lot of people think or feel that he's kind of remaking Firestarter.
Yeah.
So I didn't think about that when I read it, but when I heard people mention it, I actually realized that it could be the case that he's picking up on stuff he did in Firestarter and trying to do it better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then 2020, we have the short story collection or novella collection, I guess you could say, If It Bleeds, which had 4 or 5 stories. I can't remember, but I know one was a Holly story and the other one was The Life of Chuck, which Mike Flanagan's just finished shooting as a movie, which I'm really surprised. He seems to choose really difficult assignments. But he did a fantastic job with Gerald's Game. So I'm hoping that the same thing is going to happen with Life of Chuck. And If It Bleeds has that Holly story, and I enjoyed this collection. I thought it was pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. The story about Chuck is actually one of my favorites. I really liked how it was built, that it went backwards almost. So I think that was a very interesting take on the story. So I'm very excited to see how Flanagan is turning it into a movie. And but I mean, when he did the Gerald's Game, we all said that, that's the story that can't be filmed, but he did it, and I'm confident that he will be successful with this one as well.
I hope so. And did you like the Holly story?
I did. I'm one of those who like Holly.
Yeah, me too.
I will say that I wouldn't mind if he took a little break from her, because it could be too much of a good thing. But I don't mind her, and I think she's an interesting and good character. So I definitely want to read more about her. But I could do with a couple of books in between.
Yeah, for sure. Especially as King gets along in years, we're always worried that he might not get to that next book. So we'll see how that plays out. And then 2021, he had 2 books out later, and Billy Summers. And I quite enjoyed both of them, even though later was sort of his take on The Sixth Sense. I still really enjoyed the story.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Later is actually one of my favorites of his latest books. I really, really enjoy that one. And same with Billy Summers. I thought also that was a good story, good characters. And I enjoyed both of them very much, especially Later.
And I think that Later could be a trilogy. I think it could be 2 more books. It could be we have Later, and then Soon, and then Now. New ghosts in every story, right? So I'd like to see that. And I haven't heard anything about if Billy Summers is optioned for adaptation to TV or film yet, but
I think I think I read something about it, but I mean it doesn't really mean that much in the beginning when you heard the first word. I mean, it's more or less happens with everything he published, that this is going to be a movie, and right. In 80-90% nothing happens. So
yeah, for sure. And then last year, again, we had 2 books, and that was Gwendy's Final Task, which he co-wrote with Richard Chismar, and Fairy Tale. And Gwendy's Final Task surprised me in several aspects, and though I always call it Gwendy Goes to Outer Space, but because they threw us a curveball with Richard Ferris, because I assumed he was Randall Flagg in the first 2 books, and then we found out in the 3rd book that he's not. But I actually liked how that story ended, and I thought it was pretty good. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I enjoyed the entire series, not as much as his normal books, but I think it wasn't bad. But I think the last one was definitely the best one of the 3. Yeah.
Cool. And Fairy Tale, what'd you think of that one?
Oh, feeling about that one actually. I like the first part before he goes down the well. That one is definitely my favorite part of the book, and the relationship between the boy and the old man. I can't remember their names right now.
Right.
But then as he went down and everything happened in the other place, I felt that it was a little bit too much, and I don't know, maybe I'm not that big a fan of that kind of story, fantasy. So it kind of lost me a little bit there.
Yeah.
And especially, I think the last fight could have been left out. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the first part, but then I didn't think that it didn't have the strength to follow through all the way.
Yeah, it was King's homage to the Grimm brothers fairy tales types of stuff. So there was a lot of reference to that. Plus, in the middle section, it was kind of morphed into a Hunger Games kind of story as well. So it was there was a lot crammed into that book. But I did really enjoy the section where they were trying to escape the city and going through the cemetery. I thought that was really creepy and gave me Salem Slot vibes. I really liked that section of the book. But yeah, I agree with you. The first section of the book, I could have stayed in the real world and just followed that story. I really enjoyed that part of it.
And that's that's King's, what he do best is the relationship between mainly an older person and the younger, or the relationship between two individuals. That's his strength. So I'm not surprised.
No, which is a good segue into his latest book, Holly, which does have a relationship between an older and a younger character. I think that this is the best Holly story that he's written so far.
Yeah,
and plus he tackled a subject matter that he had never gone before with cannibalism, which threw me for a loop. So I really enjoyed this story quite a bit, and I do think that his next book is going to focus on Jerome, if I've heard that correctly. Have you heard that? Or
I think he should. He mentioned that Holly would be there, but I don't know if Jerome. I'm not sure actually. I think I only heard that Holly was going to be in.
Okay.
Or if it's, I don't know if it's his next, but the one he's been working on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Holly, that book. I think, even though I like Holly, I think the thing that made that book so good was actually the two cannibals.
The older couple.
I mean, Holly brought her thing to the book, of course, but I think that it was the cannibals that made it really, really exciting book and really scary, because I think that when he describes something that could actually happen in real life, that is actually more scary than vampires or make-believes horror. So I thought it was a really scary book. Yeah,
and I thought there was that one scene right when the girl is it Bonnie? I think that she's been looking for the whole story. She wakes up and just before they've got her on the table and she thinks they're going to rape her. Right? This is no, we're going to eat you, and then and that's the end of the scene. So I don't know if younger King would have maybe actually talked about or written about the actual dismemberment of her or not, but sometimes I think it's better to leave it up to the reader's imagination, because that was a pretty creepy creepy moment in the story for sure.
I agree.
And King's done a lot lately, like in later Billy Summers fairy tale, not too much, but Holly, there's always been this discussion about the craft of writing that he always manages to work into that too, and I really enjoy that aspect of his books quite a bit. So I think some people get tired of him always writing about writers in his stories, but I just can't get enough about King talking about writing. So I really like that aspect of it quite a bit. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he also managed to get that into another story as well. So it's not just a book about a writer. It's a writer that ends up in a situation that is good for the story. So I think he works very well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to get back to your main page here. Here we go. So you mentioned a couple of movies. We're not going to go back through all the years. I'll just do 2023. But what do we got here? We had 3 movies, I think, that were not a great year for King movies. There was the Bloodlines. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Bloodlines. Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. But that apparently is the best out of the 3 that were released last year or this year.
Yeah, if you ask me, I mean, we had The Children of the Corn, and by now we know that those are really bad movies.
Yeah,
and we had the remake of Firestarter, and
yes,
that one is just horrible.
Yeah,
butching the material.
It's too bad. They ruined the Rainbird character.
And all the logics is gone, and
and I really thought that it was a shame because the girl I thought actually was pretty good, but the story just didn't help. And I thought the guy that played the father, his name escapes me too, the actor. It was a different role for him because he's usually done like sex comedies and whatnot and stuff like that. But I thought he did a pretty good job too, and it was just disappointing on so many aspects. It really fell apart in the second half. I hated what they did to some of the characters, and that's like the Pet Sematary remake from a couple of years ago. Ruined that story as well.
Horrible. Yeah, they took the story about family losing their child and making it a teenager zombie movie. So
So not too many good things to say about any of the latest adaptations. I guess the last really, really good adaptation was that TV series that was like a prequel to Salem's Lot with what's that actor? Adrian Brody. Chapelwaite. Yeah, that was pretty good. So, but unfortunately, that's not getting a second season. And I guess looking forward, we've got the short story collection coming out this year, and I'm hoping that he's going to do a surprise drop later in the year, but we haven't heard anything yet. But as we mentioned earlier, the next book, I believe, is a Jerome-based book with Holly as a side character. But you think it's just Holly as a side character story? You haven't?
I can't remember hearing anything about Jerome. I know he mentioned that Holly would be in it, but he's been pretty vague about it. We don't know how much she'll be in, or if it will be a book about her, or if she just be passing by, or whatever.
Right.
But she seems to take over the book she's in, so probably she'll have a rather big part, I think.
Yeah, and one of the more sad things in the recent years, of course, been the passing of Peter Straub. And from a selfish perspective, we wanted him and King to work on the third book, Talisman book. I believe King has commented that he had conversations about Straub, and they had a good idea about what they wanted the book to be. And now there's been rumblings that King might actually be working on that book. I don't know if you've heard anything to substantiate that rumor.
Well, I think it's a lot of hope that he will. But he mentioned that Straub had sent him a letter with plot story or something like that before he passed. So it seems to be that the story is there. It just has to be written. So I think it all ends up if King want to do it or not.
Right.
I think it's possible for him to do it.
Yeah. I wonder if he'll do a collaboration maybe with Joe Hill or something like that.
I think that he should probably write it himself. I don't think that, I mean, it's hard to, I don't know who would be able to replace Straub and keep his tone in it.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think it's maybe better if King wrote it himself. And I mean, he know how they wrote it, the other two books, and could probably carry on. And I think that even though Hill is a very good author, and there's a lot of others who's been mentioned that could work to collaborate, but I think they would come in with a new voice, and I don't know. I think I would prefer that King just wrote it himself and dedicated it to Peter and used the material that they worked together to produce and go from there.
Right.
But I sure hope he do the book.
Yeah, it's probably the last big unfinished story that's left to be told from King's perspective.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, is there anything else really? I mean, I've always wanted him to, and I've mentioned this numerous times with you, is I'd love him to do a sequel with Ben Mears and Mark Petrie after Salem's Lot, but I don't think he has any interest in doing that. But
no, he's always said that the sequel to Salem's Lot is Dark Tower 5, so he seems to be done with that, and the only one coming out of it was Father Callahan, so.
Yeah. So is there anything else King-wise that you know about that we haven't talked about yet coming up that fans may be excited about, or
I think that covers it. I mean, there's always rumors about more movies and stuff like that, but we don't know much about that. We have the new Salem's Lot remake that apparently is done, but just laying somewhere.
Yeah, that's like 2 years now, eh?
Yeah.
So and speaking of which, David Soul just passed away recently.
Yeah.
And he, I've watched a couple of YouTube videos. He was very positive about his experiences on Salem's Lot. So it was interesting to listen to him talking about it. Yeah.
I'm very excited about the collection actually, because there's 5 new stories in it. I think that's usually, I don't think there used to be so many new. If you're caught up with all the magazines and stuff is released since the last collection, you've read most of it. But this time we get 5 new ones. So yeah, I'm excited about that. So
yeah. Speaking of new stories, he's got one coming up in the next issue of Cemetery Dance. Have you read that story yet?
No, I haven't read that one.
No.
An extra hour or something like that, I think it was called.
Yeah. So that should be interesting. And I also found that article interesting that you posted about at one point for Thinner that Stephen King wanted John Candy to play the lead role.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting because John Candy was a surprisingly good dramatic actor too.
Yeah. But I don't know how they would have pulled it off with making him thinner. It's easier to make a thin actor look big, but the other way around is harder. So, but I think King mentioned that we would have saved his life if we cast him. So I think they would have put him on a strict diet or something like that.
And that's probably why he turned it down.
Yeah.
He probably didn't want to go on a diet.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's circle back then to your latest book, Stephen King, Not Just Horror. And you said that book is available now in the US?
Yes. It's available in the US, in Sweden, and in Italy. And it will be out in Czech Republic, Germany, Greece, at least this year, and probably a couple of more countries also as I work my charm on those publishers.
So you handle all that kind of stuff? You don't have an agent doing that for you?
I handle most of it myself. In some countries, you do need an agent because the publisher won't even talk to the author. I don't know why. I guess it's a culture thing. So I have some help with agents in certain regions, but most of it I handle all myself. Yeah.
Okay. So you say it's available in the US. Does that mean it's also available in Canada, or is that still to come?
I don't know how that works, but I think you could order it it's released by Bear Manor Media.
Okay.
And you can buy it on Amazon. So I think I don't know what the difference is really by American and Canadian editions. If you need a different publisher in Canada to make a totally different edition, or I actually don't know really how that works, but I think as long as you can order from Amazon, you can order it.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick search here on Amazon Canada. Yep, it's there. Okay.
Yeah, probably cost a fortune in shipping though, but that's the
if it's Amazon, the shipping is usually buried in the price.
Okay.
Because the book costs $29.87 Canadian. So I don't know what the US price is, but I bet you the difference is probably shipping or something, if there is. And it says here it's been out since November 29th. So
that's true. Yeah.
Okay. So as you mentioned near the top, it's everybody wants to write a book about Stephen King, and it's getting more and more difficult to come up with new slants or views on King. I think like Bev Vincent's probably had the best one when he did the Dark Tower, Road to the Dark Tower. That was a good in to talk about something new with King. You've done the short story collection, and you were able to get that Blue Air Compressor, which had not been in print for a long time, if ever.
Yeah, I think it was first time was in 71, and then in some magazine 81, I think. So yeah, it's been missing for a long time.
Right. So this idea of yours to talk about King outside of his horror writing is pretty cool. And you've already sort of mentioned the genesis of how you came about with that. How long did it take you to research and come up with the categories that you wanted to cover?
It actually didn't take all that long.
Okay.
I figured out the chapters pretty soon, and then I had to write them. And actually, I first wrote the book in English. And then I had some friends in the US read it. And even though I managed English, I didn't get it. It was obvious that it wasn't written by someone that had English as his first language. So I went back and actually rewrote it in Swedish, and then had a professional translator translate it into English, because I didn't want them release a book where the reader would more focus on my bad grammar than the actual content of the book.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it didn't take all that long. I think maybe it took like 5-6 months.
Okay.
So it was a pretty quick work. Once I think I spent more time figuring out what the book should be about. Actually, I think finding the angle, because as I said to the publisher, if we're just going to go with the same angle that someone else has already written a good book about, then you can just buy the rights for that book and translate it. I mean, there are a lot of good books about Stephen King out there, and I mean, I wouldn't want to try to write a book that Bev Vincent, for example, has already written. Then it's better to go and try to translate his work than I do another one.
Right.
So I did that, and actually, it's as you know, it's different chapters in it. And while I did it, I came up with more chapters during the process, but they didn't fit the title of the book. So once I was done with this one, I actually wrote another book almost back to back with with the chapters that were left over. That book is actually being released here in Sweden in March.
Okay.
So in about 1.5 months. And the title of that is Stephen King: Stories from 5 Decades of Storytelling. So it's the format of the book is basically the same as this one, but it's divided in 5 decades.
Okay.
And the stories is placed in the decade that they appeared. So cool. So that was a good bonus that I didn't really think about when I wrote the first one. But the second one I just kept writing, and bam, I had 2 books.
Cool.
Almost.
Oh, that's a nice surprise.
Yeah, and it was
nice
good
bonus.
timing as well, since it's this year the King celebrates 50 years. So
yeah, wow,
good timing. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I'll just quickly run down the chapters that you've got here. The collaborator, the children's book author, the publisher, the promoter, the actor, the film director, the rock star, and then you've included some previous interviews that you've done before with King. So there's 2 of those, as well as an afterword. So out of the categories that I've just listed, which one did you enjoy writing the most?
I enjoyed them all.
Okay.
I think the Rockstar one was pretty fun to write. Where King he describes at one place where he's just before a concert, he's in the toilet with bad stomach and really stressed about being able to even go up on stage. And the bouncer walks in and they have lifted all these doors to the stalls, so people shouldn't do drugs and stuff like that. So he's just standing there casual, and you're the author that wrote Firestarter or something like that. The King just get out of here.
I don't know if you included that story with Bruce Springsteen. Is that in your book, or I always think of that one.
That later,
yeah, that's a great story too, where this girl comes up to them and they just assume that she wants Springsteen's autograph, but she asks for King's instead. That's my second favorite story after the lady in the supermarket about the Shawshank Redemption.
I actually heard. I don't know if this one is true, but I think it was King who told it that when he was very young, a lady come up and wanted his autograph, and he was a bit surprised because he wasn't that famous by that time.
Right.
And she said, I've always wanted to meet you, Mr. Lucas. she thought it was George Lucas, and King actually signed it to George Lucas. So that was, I don't know if I don't want to say actually that it's true.
I don't know if it was George Lucas. I think it was Francis Ford Coppola. Maybe.
Yeah, it might have been that. Yeah, it could have been that. I could be mistaken.
He kind of looks like they kind of look the same. Okay, so the Rockstar, of course, talks about the rock bottom remainders and how all these authors got together and did gigs for charity and whatnot. So that was always fun to find out about King, and it's part of his charitable nature to do this kind of thing. Plus, he just he's always loved music, and he got to combine several of his passions and do some good for other people. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's stuff I enjoyed writing. I write about how I meet him in Hamburg as well. Mm-hmm. And we had some problem with a photographer taking out pictures, and I don't know if you've seen the pictures in the end of the book, but
yep,
I had my friend with me, and it was my turn to get the book signed by King, and me and my friend had decided beforehand that when I get my book signed, he would take a photo of me and King, and I would do the same for him when it was his turn. Mm-hmm. And just as I asked King for a photo, the official photographer also comes up and snaps a picture. So it ends up with me looking at my friend and King looking at the other photographer. So we had to do it all again. But King was very kind and just said, "Sure, we'll take another photo."
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's great. So you've got this book out, and have you done any lectures, including the book in your talk?
Yeah, I've done a couple of them. It was released in August here in Sweden last year, so it hasn't been out that much. But I've done a few lectures where I mentioned the book as well. Yeah.
Right. And what's the audience's reactions to the stories that you tell about his non-writing stuff? Are they surprised or?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, that was the basis of why I wrote the book and where I got the idea that a lot of people are very surprised. And I mean, a lot of people come up to me when before the lecture and say that, I haven't read anything by Stephen King. I don't dare to write it. He's just writing this scary stuff, and I don't dare to read it. And I try to explain to them that he has done a lot of other things, and as I said, they look at me very suspicious and think that no, that cannot be true. During the lecture, when I mentioned with the Green Mile and the Shawshank Redemption, I can see the surprise in a few people's faces that did he do that one? And they don't have a clue. So they've actually seen and maybe even read. Probably not read, but definitely seen the movies without even realizing that it was a King movie. So so I try to get them. To start with that, and hopefully they will discover what fantastic storyteller is, and they can go from there and pick other books as well.
For sure. One of my, I'm wondering how audiences react to it, and for me, I have a personal bias in it, is because you sent me this book after I told you I was never going to buy it, and that King wrote a children's book.
Yeah. I mentioned that, and I always tell them that if you have children, buy this book and read it to them, and I'm sure none of them have. They look very, very. They don't want to do that, but
which of course we're talking about Charlie the Choo Choo.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful picture in it, and I'm sure that once you understand it, I mean, if you just look at the picture, and if you that young and just watch the pictures, you're not going to understand the undertone of them, and then it works. And when you're big enough to understand the undertone, you're probably big enough to take it as well. So I think it's. I mean, my kids are around 20 now, so I'm too late, but I would definitely have read that to them if I had it when they were small.
I don't know. That last picture in the book is pretty disturbing, though. With all those kids screaming on the train. So So that's for the uninitiated. That's part of the story from The Wastelands, where that book, the children's book, is referenced. And somebody just had the bright idea to produce it as a children's book. And I think it first launched at San Diego Comic-Con, and he even hired an actor or actress to play the writer of the book and all this stuff. So it was pretty cool. So
he actually signed copies of the book as Beverly Evans, the fictional author. So there's books by Stephen King writing under pseudonym, signed by an actor trying to be a pseudonym.
And another favorite portion of the book that I really enjoy is, because this is a guilty pleasure for me, is when you talked about him as a director for Maximum Overdrive. Because I love that movie. It's terrible, but I love it.
I like it as well. And as you say, it's a terrible movie. And I mean, you can't take it serious. But if you take it for what it is, it's actually a fun movie, and
I mean,
you can enjoy
it. I mean, what more do you want?
AC/DC and Lisa Simpson.
Fantastic. Just fantastic. So very cool. So is there anything else specifically about the book that you wanted to mention?
I can mention one thing, that this is actually going to be in the next book, but I can mention it as a preview because I think it's quite fun. I'm writing a little bit about Bachman in it, and if you read Thinner, you will notice that when the gypsy man is throwing the curse, he's actually doing it in Swedish. So he's using Swedish words like "don't take me to grandma" and "flip through" and stuff like that as the curse. And I have always been very interested in and wondering how did those words end up there. And I've always imagined that King sitting in his writing desk and probably not know what language he was going to write in. Right. And just picking one of his foreign copies and happened to end up with The Shining, the Swedish edition of The Shining, because that's from where those phrases are. And picking them. But I have never known. And while working on the second book, I got an email from a woman in Sweden who had actually, I think it was in the 80s, sent a letter to King asking this particular question. And she got a response from King where he wrote that he was actually writing the book, and the plan was to just take some nonsense word and then have a professional translator translate them into whatever language the gypsy is going to speak. And he happened to have actually a copy of the Swedish edition of Shining lying on his desk. So he actually picked that one up and pulled the phrases out of it. And cool. Then he sent it to his agent to try and find a translator, and he didn't find anyone. So that just kept being put in there, and nobody they forgot about it, and then bam, the book was released, and those phrases were still in it. So it was fun to know that I wasn't totally wrong. The only thing was that the copy was laying at his desk and not standing in his bookcase behind him. So so that story is actually in the next book. But
and your next book is called again what?
Stephen King Stories from 5 Decades of Storytelling.
Okay, and that'll be out in the US?
It's being out in March, Sweden, and I hope to have it out in the US during 2024.
Probably in the fall?
Yeah, probably in the fall, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a date or any details yet, but I feel confident that it will be out in English. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about your books? Or?
No, I think we've covered most of it, yeah.
Okay. So just before I let you go, I just remembered something I wanted to mention off the top when we were talking about King stuff. I don't know if you've been following like physical releases of some of his movies. There's been a couple of pretty significant ones, and now they're starting to get 4K releases as well. Two I'll mention is I just picked up The Dead Zone in 4K. And it looks fantastic. It's probably the best I've ever seen it, because that was one of those VHS movies that, it never looked really that great. And there was never really a really good transfer of it. But now there's a 4K transfer, and it looks fantastic. And the other one I want to mention is Needful Things. It has a 4K release as well as it has a Blu-ray release. And the cool thing about the Blu-ray release is that it has the 3-hour cut of the miniseries as opposed to the 4K, which only has the 2-hour TV release. So if you're a fan of that story or of that movie, it's definitely worth getting, and that extra hour makes a big difference. I didn't really care for the miniseries, the 2-hour version, or the movie, I guess I should say, but the 3-hour cut is much better, as it usually is with these kind of stories. So
I've seen that there are a lot of movies coming out physically now, and I haven't gotten any of them myself. Mostly because they haven't been released here in Sweden, and I'm a bit too lazy to order them. And it's also a question about the costs. I mean, delivery, and you have to pay taxes.
Do you even have a Blu-ray player?
I do have a Blu-ray player. I actually, when I was in the US back in 2012, I actually bought one who could play US copies of Blu-ray. I brought it home. I didn't use it for 4 years. Then I actually got a US Blu-ray. I put it in, and the machine just broke. It didn't work for even half a minute.
Wow,
I throw it out. Yeah.
So
I don't know how strict they are with regions on those discs now, or if you can play one bought in the US.
Yeah, they're mostly region free nowadays. But it's on a disc by disc basis. So but that Needful Things 3 hours, that one I would actually want to see. I do actually have a VHS copy of it that I
had a friend in the US record for me. But that would mean bringing out the old VHS player, put it up to the TV, complaining about what crappy image. So
for sure.
I haven't seen it in many years, but I would really like to see that one. So if that one is released where I can get my hands on it, I would probably get that one.
Check the UK Amazon site or Spain or something. You usually get it cheaper there than you can from anywhere else. All right, Hans, I'm running up on the end of my recording time. So before we get cut off, I just wanted to say it's been a blast to talk to you again. It's been far too long. Maybe your next book comes out this year, or we can talk later in the year again about your new book. And I wish you all the best. And thanks for keeping your website going and keeping us up to date on all the Stephen King stuff that's going on.
Thank you. It felt like coming home.
All right. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.